The stars looked different from the bridge of the horizon's edge. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood near the main viewport and watched the darkness of space stretch endlessly before him. He had been in the service for 8 years now, and still the vastness amazed him every single time. Today, though, something felt wrong. The sensors had picked up unusual readings near the Jupiter mining. Colonies and Captain Helen Wade had ordered the ship to investigate. Jake turned away from the viewport as the alarm system started blaring throughout the bridge. Red lights flashed in rhythmic patterns, and the crew members rushed to their stations with practiced efficiency. Danny Chen sat at the communications console, and his fingers moved rapidly across the holographic interface. Lieutenant Chris Baker manned the weapons station while Susan Price monitored the engineering systems from her post near the rear of the bridge. The view screen flickered to life, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. Ships emerged from hyperspace directly ahead of them. Not human ships, though. These vessels were sleek and angular, with surfaces that seemed to shimmer with some kind of strange energy. The hull designs reminded Jake of pictures he had seen in history books about ancient warriors, but these ships were clearly built with technology far beyond anything humanity currently possessed. Captain Wade stood from her command chair and smoothed down her uniform. She was a veteran of 30 years in the Defense Force, and Jake had never seen her look worried until this moment. Her jaw tightened as she studied the alien fleet on the view screen. There were at least 20 ships out there, and each one looked capable of destroying the horizon's edge without breaking a sweat. Danny Chen worked frantically at his console and tried every communication frequency known to Earth science. He cycled through mathematical patterns and universal greeting protocols that had been developed specifically for first contact scenarios. The bridge fell silent except for the soft beeping of computer systems and the low hum of the ship's engines. Everyone waited. Everyone hoped that these newcomers came in peace. The view screen suddenly changed and showed a single figure standing in what appeared to be a command center. Jake leaned forward and studied the image carefully. The figure wore armor unlike anything he had ever seen before. The design looked ceremonial almost, decorated with patterns that glowed with soft blue and green light. The helmet was the most striking feature. It resembled traditional Apache war gear, but crafted from materials that seemed alive with energy. Crystallized feathers rose from the top of the helmet, and they moved slightly as if responding to an invisible wind. The figure spoke, and the voice came through synthesized and mechanical. The translation software built into the ship's systems worked to decode the language in real time. Jake watched the subtitles appear on the lower portion of the view screen as the warrior delivered their message. The words were formal and carried an unmistakable tone of authority, mixed with something that sounded like barely contained aggression. The warrior informed Captain Wade that human vessels had violated the territorial boundaries of something called the Chiricahua Dominion. The name struck Jake as oddly familiar. He had studied Native American history in school and remembered reading about the Chiricahua Apache. But that made no sense. How could an alien species share a name with an Earth culture? The warrior continued speaking and demanded that all human ships withdraw immediately from this sector of space. If they refused, they would face judgment through combat. Captain Wade stepped closer to the view screen and introduced herself clearly. She explained that the mining colonies had existed in this location for over 3 decades. Earth claimed no ownership over the space itself, but merely sought to extract resources peacefully and coexist with any neighbors who might share this region of the galaxy. She offered diplomatic discussions and cultural exchange. She emphasized humanity's desire for peaceful relations with all intelligent species. The armored figure tilted their head in a gesture that somehow seemed amused despite the concealing helmet. The warrior spoke again, and this time the tone carried a hint of mockery. Humans always talked when actions spoke more clearly. The warrior then proposed a solution: single combat between champions. One fighter from each side would meet in neutral territory and battle until one emerged victorious. The winner's people would claim rights to this sector. If humanity refused the challenge, the Chiricahua Dominion would interpret that refusal as an act of complete surrender and subjugation. The transmission ended abruptly before Captain Wade could respond. The view screen returned to showing the alien fleet, which maintained its position in space. The ships neither advanced nor retreated. They simply waited for humanity's answer like patient predators watching cornered prey. Jake followed Captain Wade to the ready room along with the other senior officers. The door sealed behind them, and the captain immediately began pacing. Her hands clasped behind her back, and her expression showed the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Chris Baker spoke first, and his voice carried frustration. They had no choice, really. If Earth refused this challenge, then every species in the galaxy would learn that humans could be intimidated and pushed around. But Susan Price countered with the obvious risk. Everything depended on a single fight. If they lost, what happened to the mining colonies? What happened to the families living there? What happened to humanity's expansion into space? Captain Wade stopped pacing and turned to face Jake directly. She told him that he had the highest combat scores in the entire fleet. Hand-to-hand combat, tactical response, adaptive strategy under pressure. All his marks were exceptional. She made it clear that the choice was his to make. But she was asking him to volunteer as Earth's champion. She was asking him to fight for humanity's future among the stars. Jake thought about his sister Katie, who still lived on Earth. He thought about his nephew who wanted to become a pilot just like his uncle, Jake. He thought about the thousands of miners and their families working on the Jupiter colonies. He thought about what it meant to be human and what it meant to stand up when everything important was at stake. The decision formed in his mind before the captain finished speaking. He would fight. He had to fight. There was no other choice that he could live with. 20 hours later, Jake found himself aboard a small shuttle heading toward a neutral asteroid. The location had been agreed upon quickly through terse communications between the two fleets. The asteroid was large enough to provide a suitable arena, but small enough that atmosphere generators could create a breathable environment within a magnetic containment field. Jake checked his equipment one final time as the shuttle approached the landing zone. He wore a standard combat exosuit that enhanced his strength and speed. The armor included integrated shield generators and a helmet display that would track his opponent's movements and vital signs. His weapon was a plasma-edged combat staff, standard issue for boarding actions but deadly in any environment. The shuttle touched down, and Jake stepped out onto the rocky surface of the asteroid. Jake walked slowly across the crater floor and felt the artificial gravity pulling at his boots. The atmosphere generators hummed steadily around the perimeter and created a dome of breathable air held in place by magnetic fields. Above him, he could see both fleets positioned at safe distances. Earth ships on one side and the Chiricahua vessels on the other. Thousands of eyes watched through sensors and view screens. The weight of that attention pressed down on Jake's shoulders almost as heavily as the armor he wore. The crater itself measured roughly 200 meters across. The surface was gray and pocked with smaller impact craters from ancient meteor strikes. There was no cover, no terrain advantage to exploit, just open ground and two fighters who would decide the fate of entire civilizations. Jake reached the center point marked by a holographic beacon and stopped. He planted his staff in the ground beside him and waited. On the opposite side of the crater, a beam of light appeared. The transporter technology was far more advanced than Earth's own systems. The light faded and the Apache warrior stood there in full armor. Up close, the design was even more impressive. Geometric patterns flowed across the surface like living tattoos. The colors shifted from blue to green to purple as the warrior moved. The crystallized feathers on the helmet caught the light from distant stars and seemed to glow from within. The warrior carried a lance that hummed with barely contained energy. An automated voice echoed across the arena. The rules were simple and brutal. Combat would continue until one fighter yielded, lost consciousness, or died. There were no time limits, no breaks, no mercy unless the fighters themselves chose to show it. The voice finished speaking and then added a single word that made Jake's heart pound harder in his chest. Begin. The warrior moved first, and the speed was inhuman. Jake barely had time to pull his staff up before the lance drove toward his chest. The impact sent shockwaves through his entire body. His shield generators flared bright blue as they absorbed the energy. Warning indicators flashed across his helmet display. Shield integrity down to 70% from a single blow. Jake rolled to the side and activated his jump jets. The short burst carried him 15 meters away and gave him a moment to assess the situation. His opponent moved like water flowing downhill. Every motion was smooth and efficient. The lance spun in complex patterns that Jake recognized from ancient martial arts. But this was no historical recreation. The warrior fought with techniques refined over generations and enhanced by technology that bent physics. The lance struck the ground where Jake had been standing, and the rock exploded into fragments. The warrior was already moving again and closing the distance between them. Jake brought his staff up in a defensive position and prepared himself. His training took over. Block high, deflect low, sidestep right, counterstrike to the left. The movements were automatic now and burned into his muscle memory through countless hours of practice. Their weapons clashed and the sound echoed across the crater like thunder. Sparks flew where plasma met energy. Jake felt the impact jar his arms and shoulders. His exosuit compensated for some of the force, but not all of it. He gave ground steadily and allowed the warrior to push him back. He needed to understand the fighting style. He needed to find weaknesses and develop a strategy that might give him a chance. The warrior pressed the attack without mercy. The lance left trails of glowing energy in the air. Each strike was powerful enough to crack the asteroid's surface when it missed Jake by inches. He found himself fighting purely defensively. His world narrowed to the immediate threats. Block this strike. Dodge that thrust. Keep moving or die. Sweat ran down his face inside the helmet and his breathing came hard and fast. Minutes stretched and twisted into something that felt like hours. Jake's muscles burned despite the assistance from his exosuit. His ribs ached from impacts that his shields had only partially absorbed. He managed to score a hit finally. His staff connected solidly with the warrior's shoulder armor. But instead of causing damage, the ornate plating seemed to absorb the plasma energy and glowed even brighter. The warrior's armor was feeding on his attack somehow. The synthesized voice spoke and caught Jake off guard. The warrior sounded almost conversational despite the deadly dance they were engaged in. The words praised Jake's skill and admitted he fought better than expected. But then the warrior added that Jake fought like a soldier following doctrine and training. The warrior claimed to be born of war itself. Born to this, raised for this, living for this. The attacks intensified immediately after those words. The lance became a blur of movement too fast for Jake's eyes to track properly. He relied on his helmet's predictive software and his own instincts. He felt his left shield generator fail with a pop and a shower of sparks. Then his right generator went down seconds later. A strike caught him in the ribs and he heard something crack inside his armor. Pain lanced through his side sharp enough to make his vision blur. Jake stumbled backward and tried to maintain his balance. His tactical display showed critical damage to his armor's integrity. Medical sensors reported 2 cracked ribs and possibly a third. His breathing came in short gasps now, and each one sent fresh pain shooting through his chest. This was it. He was going to lose. Earth's champion would fall, and everything humanity had built in this sector would be forfeit. But then Jake thought about Katie and her son. He thought about the miners who had spent decades building lives on those colonies. He thought about all the people throughout history who had faced impossible odds and fought anyway. Not because they thought they could win, but because giving up was worse than dying. Something hardened inside Jake's chest. A core of pure stubborn human refusal to quit. He shifted his entire approach to the fight. The warrior had said he fought like a soldier. Fine, he would stop fighting like a soldier. He would fight like a desperate human with everything to lose. He would throw out the training manual and the proper techniques. He would fight dirty and unpredictable and with every trick he could imagine. Jake feinted left and then activated his damaged jump jets. They sputtered and sparked but gave him enough thrust to launch straight up. The warrior tracked him with the lance and prepared to intercept his landing. But Jake had already deactivated the jets. He fell like a stone while spinning his staff above his head. The maneuver was tactically insane. It left him completely vulnerable in midair, but it was so unexpected that the warrior hesitated for just a fraction of a second. That tiny hesitation was all Jake needed. His staff connected with the warrior's helmet, with the full force of his armored weight behind the blow. The impact was tremendous. Both fighters went sprawling across the crater floor in opposite directions. Jake hit the ground hard and his cracked ribs screamed in agony. He forced himself to roll and come up on his feet. Pain tried to drag him down, but he ignored it. He had momentum now. He had surprised his opponent. He had to press the advantage. Jake stood in the station's main observation deck and watched ships dock from both civilizations. The view never got old. Earth vessels with their practical designs and efficient lines, Shirakawa ships with flowing organic curves and bioluminescent markings. 3 months ago, these two groups had been preparing for war. Now they worked together, traded information, built friendships. It was not perfect and there were still tensions. But progress was happening. Maya entered the observation deck and moved to stand beside him. Close enough that their shoulders touched. She wore a hybrid uniform now, a design that combined elements from both Earth and Chiricahua military traditions. Jake wore a similar uniform. They were symbols of the new cooperation, living bridges between two branches of humanity. Maya informed him that Katie had sent another message. Jake's sister wanted to know when she could visit the station and meet Maya properly. Katie's son apparently thought Maya was the coolest person in existence. The boy was telling everyone at school that his uncle got beaten up by an alien warrior princess. Jake groaned. His nephew had a very loose understanding of what actually happened. And Maya was definitely not a princess. She was a military commander who would probably laugh at the princess designation. Maya teased that getting beaten by a girl must be embarrassing for Jake, especially in front of thousands of witnesses from both fleets. Jake countered that Maya was not just any girl. She was a highly trained warrior from an advanced civilization with technology 3,000 years more developed than Earth's. He felt that deserved some credit. Maya replied firmly that there were no free passes, only excuses. But she smiled as she said it. That smile had become more frequent over the past months. Jake had learned to treasure it. They watched a Chiricahua cruiser glide past the viewport. Its hull was decorated with glowing patterns that Maya had explained represented the ship's lineage and battle honors. Each mark told a story. Each color signified an accomplishment. It was beautiful in a way that Earth ships were not, but Maya insisted that Earth vessels possessed their own beauty. The beauty of determination, of achieving space travel through innovation and stubbornness, rather than inherited technology. Both approaches had value. Both deserved respect. Jake asked quietly if Maya ever thought about how things would be different if he had won their fight completely. If he had defeated her before the helmet came off, would they be standing here now? Would any of this cooperation have happened? Maya considered the question carefully. She said the Chiricahua Dominion would have withdrawn after his victory. They would have reported to their government that Earth possessed skilled warriors. Diplomatic contact would have followed. Slower and more formal, but the outcome would have been similar eventually. But she added that they would not have had this moment, this connection. Whatever was growing between them would not exist. Jake asked what this was exactly. They spent almost every day together. They trained together, ate meals together, talked for hours about everything and nothing. But they had never actually defined what they were to each other. Friends seemed insufficient. Colleagues was too cold. Something else existed between them, but neither had put it into words. Maya's hand found his and their fingers interlaced naturally. She spoke about Chiricahua traditions. Warriors who fought to a standstill were considered bound by fate. The universe placed them in each other's paths for a reason. She said she believed that now. She had not believed in fate before. She believed in skill and training and making your own destiny. But meeting Jake had changed her perspective. Jake said that falling in love was not part of his mission briefing. The words came out before he could stop them. He had not meant to say love. That was too much too soon. But Maya did not pull away. Instead, she moved closer. Her voice was soft when she replied that the best things in life were never planned. They just happened when two people were brave enough to recognize something special. The observation deck was quiet, except for the low hum of station systems. Stars blazed beyond the viewports. Somewhere out there were dozens of human civilizations, scattered populations that had spent millennia apart. Now they were finding each other, learning about each other, building connections across the gaps of time and distance. Maya explained that the Preservation Initiative scattered humanity, thinking they were saving everyone from destruction. Instead, they gave humanity something unexpected, the chance to grow differently, to develop unique perspectives and technologies, to become stronger through diversity rather than weaker through isolation. And now all those scattered branches were coming back together, not as the same people who were separated, but as something better, something new. Jake agreed it was like a second chance for humanity, a chance to build something amazing by combining the strengths of every scattered culture. But he added that big changes started with small connections, individual choices. A human from Earth and a human from the stars choosing to see past 3,000 years of separation, choosing to recognize each other as kindred spirits. Maya said that was exactly right. Then she kissed him. It was not their first kiss. That had happened 2 weeks ago after a particularly intense sparring session. But this kiss felt different, more certain, more committed, It was a promise of something that extended beyond friendship or attraction. It was choosing to build something together despite all the complications and challenges. When they separated, Jake rested his forehead against hers. His ribs no longer hurt. Medical had finally cleared him for full duty. The physical wounds from their first meeting had healed. Other things were just beginning. Maya whispered that she still owed him a rematch. She wanted to settle once and for all who was the better fighter. Jake laughed and said anytime she wanted. But maybe next time, they could keep the helmets on until after the fight. Maya asked where the fun was in that approach. Below them on the docking levels, more ships arrived. Aboriginal Australian craft with hull designs that resembled traditional dot paintings, transformed into functional starships. Incan vessels whose design philosophy emphasized harmony with space itself. Mongolian fast attack ships built for speed and maneuverability above all else. Humanity in all its diverse glory scattered among the stars and now returning to find each other. Representatives from each culture came to the station. Diplomats and scientists and warriors and teachers. Everyone wanted to be part of this moment. This reunion of a species that had been fragmented for so long. The conferences and meetings and celebrations went on for weeks. Jake attended many of them and met humans who looked nothing like him but shared the same core values that made them family despite the centuries of separation. One evening, Jake and Maya escaped the crowds and found a quiet corner of the station. They sat together and watched Earth rotating slowly in the distance. The homeworld, the origin point, the place where humanity first looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. Maya had tears in her eyes. She had never seen Earth before. Her people were told it was destroyed. Seeing it now, beautiful and blue and alive, was overwhelming. Jake held her and let her process the emotions. She told him that everything her people built was in honor of a dead world. Every ship, every colony, every cultural tradition maintained. It was all to preserve what they thought was lost forever. Now they learned Earth survived. Part of her was overjoyed, but part of her felt grief for the 3,000 years her people spent mourning a world that was not actually dead. Jake said he understood. Earth had spent those same thousands of years thinking humanity was alone in the universe, believing they were the only intelligence in the cosmos, building everything without knowing that family existed among the stars. Both civilizations had been shaped by incorrect beliefs. Both carried scars from that isolation. But now they could heal together. They could build something new based on truth instead of incomplete information. Jake rushed forward before the warrior could fully recover. For the first time since the fight began, his opponent was off balance. The perfect defensive stance had broken. Jake attacked with everything he had left. He used every dirty trick and unconventional tactic he had learned during 8 years of service. He grabbed handfuls of asteroid dust and threw it at the warrior's helmet sensors. He used his damaged jump jets in short, erratic bursts that made his movements impossible to predict. He fought without honor or grace. He fought with the raw, desperate stubbornness that defined humanity when backed into a corner. The warrior adapted quickly, but Jake had seized control of the fight's rhythm. His staff found gaps in the ornate armor. He struck the warrior's side and felt the impact connect solidly. Another hit landed on the warrior's leg. Then his staff cracked against the warrior's arm hard enough to make the lance dip for a moment. Each successful strike seemed to anger his opponent. The fighting style became more aggressive and less controlled. The smooth water-like movements gave way to something rawer and more emotional. They met in the center of the crater and their weapons clashed with explosive force. Sparks and energy discharge filled the air between them. Jake could hear his own ragged breathing inside his helmet. His heart hammered against his cracked ribs. His strength was fading fast. The pain medication his suit had injected was wearing off. He had maybe one more exchange left in him. One final effort. He had to make it count or this was over. The warrior thrust the lance forward in a powerful strike aimed at Jake's chest. He ducked under it and used the last of his jump jet fuel to throw himself forward. His shoulder connected with the warrior's midsection. They collided and both fighters went down hard. They hit the ground tangled together and rolled across the rocky surface. Jake's staff was knocked from his grip and went skittering away. The warrior's lance flew in the opposite direction and landed meters away from either of them. They grappled now with no weapons between them, just armor against armor, strength against strength, will against will. Jake's hands searched desperately for any advantage. His training included close-quarters combat, but the warrior was incredibly strong. They rolled again and Jake ended up on top. His hand brushed against something on the side of the warrior's helmet. A seal-release mechanism of some kind. Without thinking, operating purely on instinct, Jake twisted the mechanism hard. There was a hiss of escaping air. The helmet's locking system disengaged with a series of clicks. Jake pulled and the helmet came free in his hands. Time seemed to slow down as he stared at what the helmet had concealed. Long dark hair spilled out and framed a face that was distinctly human. Not alien, not even slightly alien. The warrior was a woman. She had high cheekbones and bronze skin marked with intricate tattoos. Her eyes were dark and fierce, and they burned with an intensity that hit Jake harder than any blow from her lance. She was Apache, genuinely and unmistakably Apache. The facial features, the tattoos, the way her hair was traditionally braided. Everything about her spoke of Native American heritage. But that was impossible. The Chiricahua Dominion was supposed to be an alien species. They commanded an interstellar fleet. They had technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities. They could not be human. Yet the woman staring up at Jake from beneath him was as human as he was. Jake could not finish the thought forming in his mind. His brain struggled to process what his eyes were showing him. The woman beneath him looked equally shocked. Her fierce warrior's expression had transformed into confusion and something else. Recognition, maybe? Or the same existential crisis that was currently short-circuiting Jake's ability to think clearly. The automated voice of the arena interrupted the moment. Combat had been paused. Both fighters should await instructions from their respective command authorities. The words barely registered in Jake's consciousness. He was still staring at the woman. Still trying to understand how this was possible, Jake realized he was still straddling her. Still holding her helmet in his hands like some kind of trophy. He scrambled backward quickly, and his damaged ribs sent sharp protests through his nervous system. The woman rose to her feet with fluid grace. Her hand moved to her exposed face as if she was surprised to find it bare to the open air. She spoke, and her voice was no longer filtered through synthesizers. It was warm and rich and completely human. She asked how this was possible. She said that Jake was from Earth, the original Earth. Her people had searched for centuries. The sentence trailed off incomplete. Her expression showed the same confusion and wonder that Jake felt churning in his own chest. Captain Wade's voice crackled through Jake's communication system. She asked what was happening. All the Earthship sensors had suddenly gone haywire. The Chiricahua vessels were powering up their weapon systems. The captain needed information, and she needed it immediately. Jake could hear the tension in her voice. Jake looked at the woman standing before him. At this human woman who commanded an interstellar fleet, who had nearly killed him minutes ago, who was now looking at him with an expression that mixed wonder and fear and hope in equal measures. He had to tell the captain. He had to tell everyone. This changed everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. Jake spoke slowly into his communicator. He told Captain Wade that negotiations needed to restart from the very beginning. They were not dealing with an alien species. The Chiricahua Dominion was human. They were us. Separated somehow, lost to history, but human nonetheless. The silence that followed his words seemed to stretch forever. Then the captain's voice came back, and she ordered Jake to bring the warrior aboard the Horizon's Edge immediately. They needed answers. They needed to understand how this was possible. The war that had almost started minutes ago was now paused, replaced by questions that threatened to rewrite everything humanity understood about its own history. The woman looked at Jake and seemed to come to some decision. She nodded once. She would come aboard the Earthship, but her own command staff would accompany her. This was too important for hasty decisions or misunderstandings. If humans from Earth and humans from the Chiricahua Dominion were about to meet after centuries of separation, then they needed to do this carefully. Jake agreed and signaled for a shuttle. While they waited, he studied the woman more carefully. She stood with a warrior's posture, back straight, weight balanced, ready to move in any direction at a moment's notice. But there was something else in her bearing now. Uncertainty, maybe, or excitement. The tattoos on her face were traditional Apache designs. He recognized them from historical photographs. Lightning bolts and geometric patterns that told stories about the wearer's accomplishments and lineage. The shuttle arrived, and both fighters boarded. They sat across from each other in the small passenger compartment. Neither spoke during the short flight to the Horizon's Edge. Jake was not sure what to say. How do you start a conversation with someone who just tried to kill you? Someone who represents an impossible branch of humanity that should not exist. Someone who looked at him with eyes that held too many emotions to name. The shuttle docked and they made their way to the conference room where Captain Wade waited. 3 more Chiricahua warriors had transported aboard. When they removed their helmets, they were all clearly human. All bore Apache features and traditional markings. The implications were staggering. Jake laughed and then immediately winced as his ribs reminded him they were still damaged. He explained that Earth military called it adaptive tactics. Really, it was just creative desperation. When a fighter was outmatched, they stopped following the rulebook and started making things up as they went along. Survival instinct and human stubbornness combined into something that looked like strategy, but was actually controlled chaos. Maya admitted that it nearly worked. If Jake had been at full strength without the damaged equipment, he might have actually beaten her. There was respect in her voice, admiration even. Jake countered by pointing out that if Maya had been trying to kill him from the start instead of testing him, he would have died in the first minute. He had noticed how she pulled certain strikes. Attacks that could have ended the fight cleanly but instead veered off at the last moment. Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. In the corridor's lower gravity, she seemed to float. Her long hair drifted around her face in the recycled air currents. She asked how he noticed. Jake told her that when you train for combat as long as he had, you develop instincts about killing intent. Maya's attacks were aggressive, but not murderous. She was testing him, trying to understand something that her intelligence reports had not explained. Maya confirmed his assessment. Something had felt wrong from the beginning. The way Jake fought, the way he moved. It felt human in a way she could not articulate. Chiricahua intelligence claimed Earth forces fought like machines, precise and cold, following programming without creativity or passion. But Jake fought with spirit, with the same warrior ethos that Chiricahua culture honored and celebrated. She needed to understand why an alien would fight like a human. Jake said they now knew the answer. They were not aliens to each other. Same species, same source, just separated by time and distance and the machinations of future humans who thought they were saving civilization. Maya asked if that was really true, though. Could they claim to be the same humanity? 3,000 years of divergent history and evolution. Different challenges, different threats, different adaptations. The Chiricahua Dominion had faced things Earth could not imagine. They had changed. Could they really claim to be the same? Jake thought about that question while looking out at the stars. His grandmother had raised him after his parents died in a shuttle accident. She used to tell him that being human was not about genetics or appearance. It was about the choices people made when faced with impossible situations, standing up for what mattered. Protecting those who could not protect themselves. Never giving up even when every logical reason said surrender was the smart move. From what he had seen, the Chiricahua Dominion understood those principles. So yes, they were the same where it counted. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand on Jake's chest plate, right over the dent her lance had left. She said she felt his ribs crack during that overhead strike. She felt them break. But he kept fighting anyway, did not yield, did not quit, just kept coming at her with everything he had. Jake said simply that he had to. Too much was riding on the fight, too many lives depending on him not giving up. Maya said softly that this was what she meant. This was the spirit she recognized. The thing that made her hesitate. When Jake removed her helmet, what did he see? What was his first thought? Jake met her eyes and spoke honestly. He saw someone beautiful, someone strong, someone who fought for something bigger than themselves. He saw someone he wanted to know better. If they could somehow get past the trying to kill each other part. That seemed like an obstacle, but maybe not an insurmountable one. Maya laughed. The sound was genuine and full of warmth. She explained that in Chiricahua culture, most meaningful relationships started with combat. They valued strength and courage and honesty. Jake had shown all three, though she added teasingly that he would need to heal those ribs before she would consider sparring with him again. She was not interested in fighting injured opponents. There was no honor in easy victories. They continued walking and talked about smaller things. Jake told stories about his sister Katie and her son. Maya described growing up on the Chiricahua homeworld. The differences in their cultures were significant, but the similarities were somehow more striking. Both valued family. Both honored service and sacrifice. Both believed in protecting the weak and standing against injustice. 3,000 years of separation had not erased the core values that made them human. Eventually, they returned to the conference room. The negotiations had progressed. Tentative agreements were forming. Earth would maintain its mining colonies but recognize Chiricahua territorial claims to the surrounding systems. Joint defensive pacts would be established against external threats. Cultural exchange programs would begin immediately. Scientists and historians would share information freely. The two branches of humanity would work together rather than fight. Captain Wade pulled Jake aside and informed him of a decision made while he was walking with Maya. Earth Command wanted a permanent military liaison to the Chiricahua Dominion, someone who could work directly with their forces to develop joint training protocols and defensive strategies, someone who had already proven capable of earning their respect. Jake was being assigned to that position effective immediately. Jake tried to keep his expression neutral but failed. Captain Wade smiled knowingly. She told him that personal feelings were not why he was chosen. He genuinely was the best person for the job. But she added that if something developed between him and Commander Delgado, Earth Command would not object. Alliances were built on trust and mutual respect. Those things often started with personal connections. The next 3 months passed in a blur of activity. Jake transferred to the newly constructed embassy station that hung in neutral space between Earth and Chiricahua territories. The station was a joint project. Earth engineers working alongside Chiricahua technicians. The design blended technologies from both civilizations and created something new, something that represented cooperation rather than conflict. Jake spent his days learning Chiricahua military tactics and teaching Earth combat doctrine. He met with officers from both fleets and worked to develop communication protocols that would allow joint operations. The work was challenging and important, but if he was honest with himself, the best part of each day was when Maya arrived for their scheduled coordination meetings. Those meetings often ran long. They would start discussing defensive formations and end up talking about philosophy or history or personal experiences. Maya told stories about growing up as the daughter of a decorated warrior, how she earned her position through years of training and combat, how she balanced the weight of command with the need to remain connected to the warriors she led. Jake shared his own journey through the military. The loss of his parents, his sister's strength in raising her son alone, his decision to serve something bigger than himself. They sparred regularly in the station's training facilities. Maya was careful not to injure his healing ribs, but she did not hold back otherwise. Each session pushed Jake to his limits. He learned from her techniques and adapted them to his own style. She incorporated some of his unpredictable tactics into her repertoire. They made each other better fighters. More importantly, they made each other better people. Katie sent regular messages from Earth. She wanted updates. She wanted details. She wanted to know everything about this mysterious warrior woman who had captured her brother's attention. Jake tried to downplay the relationship, but Katie saw through his deflections immediately. She informed him that she was planning to visit the station soon. She wanted to meet Maya properly and make sure this woman was good enough for her little brother. The conference room felt too small for the weight of history pressing down on everyone inside. Captain Wade sat at the head of the table with her senior staff arranged on either side. Jake stood near the wall and tried to ignore the pain in his ribs. Medical had offered to treat him, but he had refused. This moment was too important to miss. The warrior woman sat directly across from the captain. Her 3 companions flanked her in positions that looked casual, but Jake recognized defensive formations when he saw them. The woman introduced herself as Commander Maya Delgado. She led the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet of the Chiricahua Dominion. Her voice was steady and clear as she spoke. There was authority in every word. This was someone accustomed to command, someone who made decisions that affected millions of lives, someone who bore the weight of responsibility without flinching under the burden. Maya began to tell a story that sounded like mythology, but she insisted was documented historical fact. 3,000 years ago, humans from Earth had been taken. Not by aliens, but by other humans. Humans from a future so far advanced that they might as well have been gods to the people they took. They called themselves the Preservation Initiative. They had seen something coming. Some cataclysm that threatened to destroy Earth and all human civilization along with it. Captain Wade leaned forward and her eyes narrowed. She mentioned the arc theory. It was a fringe historical hypothesis that most mainstream scientists dismissed as fantasy. The theory suggested that advanced time travelers had interfered in human history, that they had seeded populations across the stars to preserve humanity from some unknown disaster. But there was no evidence, no proof, just speculation and wishful thinking. Maya shook her head firmly. Not mythology. Not theory. Reality. When Earth faced its cataclysm, the Preservation Initiative selected populations from cultures all around the globe. They took Apache, Maori, Aboriginal, Australian, Mongolian, Incan, and dozens of other groups. They seeded each population on habitable worlds scattered across the galaxy. They gave each group technology tailored to their cultural values and traditions. Then the Preservation Initiative vanished and left the scattered human populations to grow and develop in isolation. Susan Price spoke up from her position at the table. She asked why. Why separate humanity like that? Why not keep everyone together? Why scatter human cultures across light years of empty space and leave them alone for thousands of years? Maya's expression grew solemn. The answer was preservation. Not just biological preservation, but cultural preservation. The Preservation Initiative believed that human diversity was humanity's greatest strength. They feared that a single unified culture would become stagnant and vulnerable, so they gave each cultural group its own world. They provided technology that worked with each culture's values rather than against them. They gave humanity space to grow without interference or homogenization. Maya paused and her jaw tightened. Her hands clenched briefly on the table before relaxing again. Then she continued with the hardest part of the story. The Preservation Initiative told all the scattered populations that Earth had been destroyed. They said that each group was all that remained of humanity. They said the home world was gone and could never be recovered. The scattered seeds of humanity believed for 3,000 years that they were the only survivors of a dead civilization. Jake felt something click in his mind. Understanding dawned like sunrise. That was why the Chiricahua Dominion had claimed this territory so aggressively. They thought Earthships were aliens. They thought humans from the home world were impossible, because the home world was supposed to be destroyed. They were defending what they believed was rightfully human space against invaders who wore stolen human forms. Maya's eyes met Jake's across the room. The intensity of her gaze made his breath catch. She confirmed his understanding. Yes, the Chiricahua Dominion had spent 3,000 years expanding, growing, building an empire dedicated to preserving humanity as the ancients intended. They spread across dozens of systems and established colonies and trading networks. They developed culture and technology and philosophy, and they did it all believing they were the remnants of a destroyed civilization. Then Earthships appeared, ships claiming to be from the homeworld, from a planet that was supposed to be dead ash floating in space. Maya's voice carried pain as she described the confusion and anger her people felt. They thought Earth's appearance was a deception, some kind of trick. Maybe even a hostile species that had discovered human ruins and was using human appearance to infiltrate and destroy what remained of humanity. Captain Wade spoke softly now. But Earth survived. Whatever cataclysm the Preservation Initiative feared, humanity on Earth survived it. The home world endured. The population recovered. Technology advanced. Eventually, humans reached space on their own. They built colonies and ships and explored, all while thinking they were alone. The only intelligent life in a vast empty universe. One of Maya's companions spoke for the first time. His name was Joseph Nietzsche, and he was older than the others. Gray streaked his dark hair and deep lines marked his face. He served as senior cultural advisor to the Dominion. His voice carried weight earned through decades of experience. He said this changed everything. The Chiricahua Dominion alone controlled 87 settled worlds. They had records of 17 other human cultures seated among the stars. If Earth survived and developed independently, the implications were staggering. Jake understood what remained unspoken. Humanity was not a single species barely venturing into space. They were a galactic civilization, Fragmented and isolated for millennia, but still connected by shared biology and distant history, now they were becoming aware of each other. The diplomatic implications alone could take decades to sort out. The military implications were equally complex. Cultural exchange, technology sharing, territorial disputes, religion and philosophy. Every aspect of human civilization multiplied across dozens of worlds with thousands of years of divergent evolution. The discussions continued for hours. Historians connected through video links from Earth universities and Chiricahua academic centers. Scientists compared notes on divergent technological development. Military officers discussed defensive alliances against potential external threats. Diplomats argued about recognition of sovereignty and territorial rights. The conference room filled with voices and ideas and plans. Jake found his attention drifting repeatedly to Maya. She sat with perfect military bearing, but he caught her watching him as well. Their eyes met several times across the room. Each time something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. They had fought each other with everything they had. They had pushed each other to the absolute limit. And in that moment when her helmet came off, something had changed. Some connection had formed between two warriors who had found something more important than victory. During a break in the negotiations, Maya stood and walked over to where Jake leaned against the wall. She asked if he would walk with her. It was not quite a request and not quite an order, just an invitation from one fighter to another. Jake agreed immediately despite the protests from his ribs. They walked along one of the observation corridors that lined the outer hull of the horizon's edge. Through the transparent sections, they could see both fleets maintaining their positions, Earth ships and Chiricahua vessels side by side. No longer enemies. Not yet allies. Something in between and undefined. Maya spoke first after a long silence. She said Jake fought differently than she expected. When she studied Earth military doctrine, everything emphasized discipline and formation and following orders. But Jake had thrown dust in her face. He used broken equipment erratically. He fought like chaos itself given human form. The weeks turned into months and the initial shock of discovery faded into determined cooperation. Jake's role as military liaison expanded. He now coordinated not just with the Chiricahua Dominion, but with representatives from 7 other human cultures that had made contact with Earth. Each group brought unique military traditions and technologies. Each offered different perspectives on strategy and defense. Jake's job was to find common ground and build unified protocols. Captain Wade received a promotion to admiral and now commanded Earth's entire diplomatic fleet. Susan Price led massive technology exchange programs. Her engineering teams worked day and night to understand Chiricahua power systems, Maori biological integration techniques, and Incan gravitational manipulation. Danny Chen headed cultural liaison offices and helped create understanding between groups that had evolved in total isolation for millennia. The work was challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. Jake saw firsthand how diversity made humanity stronger. Earth forces were excellent at adaptive tactics and resource efficiency. The Chiricahua excelled at energy weapons and armor technology. Maori cultures had developed biological symbiosis with their ships. Aboriginal Australian groups mastered navigation techniques that bent space-time itself. Incans could manipulate gravity in ways Earth physicists were still trying to understand. When these strengths combined, they created capabilities that no single culture could achieve alone. Maya spent equal time between the station and her fleet responsibilities. She commanded warriors who had trained their entire lives believing Earth was destroyed. Helping them adjust to the new reality required patience and strong leadership. Some adapted quickly. Others struggled with the revelation that everything they had been taught was based on incomplete information. Maya handled each situation with wisdom and compassion. Jake watched her lead and learned from her example. They still sparred regularly. Their fighting styles had evolved through constant practice together. Jake incorporated Maya's flowing techniques into his unpredictable approach. Maya adopted some of his creative chaos into her traditional forms. Their matches drew crowds now. Other warriors came to watch Earth and Chiricahua techniques blend in real time. Some matches Jake won, others Maya dominated. They were evenly matched overall. Neither could claim clear superiority. That equality made their partnership stronger. Katie finally visited the station and brought her son along. The boy was 10 years old and completely obsessed with space travel and alien cultures. He peppered Maya with questions about Chiricahua ships and weapons and fighting techniques. Maya answered each question seriously and treated the boy with respect rather than dismissing his enthusiasm. She even took him on a tour of a Chiricahua cruiser. The kid talked about nothing else for days afterward. Katie pulled Jake aside after dinner one evening. She studied him carefully and asked if he was happy. Really happy, not just satisfied with his career or proud of his accomplishments, but genuinely happy in a way that made life worth living. Jake thought about the question and realized the answer was yes. Working with Maya and helping build bridges between human cultures gave him purpose. Being with Maya personally gave him joy. He had found something he did not know he was searching for. Katie smiled and said she could see it in how he looked at Maya. She told him that their parents would have been proud, not just of his military service, but of his willingness to build connections instead of walls, to see possibility instead of threat, to choose love across divisions that seemed insurmountable. She hugged him tightly and welcomed Maya into their family officially. The political situation continued to evolve. Earth's government struggled with the reality of multiple human civilizations. Some politicians wanted to establish Earth as the primary authority, since it was the origin world. Others argued that 3,000 years of independent development meant all human cultures deserved equal standing. Debates raged in councils and assemblies. Treaties were proposed and rejected and revised endlessly. Progress was slow, but it was happening. The Chiricahua Dominion faced similar internal discussions. Conservative factions argued for maintaining isolation and traditional ways. Progressive groups pushed for full integration with Earth and the other scattered cultures. Maya navigated these political currents carefully. She advocated for cooperation while respecting those who needed time to adjust. Her balanced approach earned respect from multiple sides. External threats provided motivation for unity. Long-range sensors detected non-human intelligences in distant sectors. Some seemed potentially peaceful. Others appeared aggressive. Humanity faced the reality that they were not alone in the universe. Other species existed and some were powerful. The scattered human cultures needed to work together if they wanted to survive and thrive in a galaxy full of unknowns. Joint military exercises began. Earth forces trained alongside Chiricahua warriors. Maori ships coordinated with Incan vessels. Aboriginal Australian navigators worked with Mongolian raiders. The exercises were messy at first. Communication protocols failed. Cultural misunderstandings caused problems. Equipment compatibility was inconsistent. But slowly, through trial and error and determination, the various human militaries learned to function as a unified force. Jake played a central role in these exercises. His ability to understand multiple fighting styles and find common ground made him invaluable. He pushed warriors from all cultures to step outside comfortable traditions, to try new approaches, to learn from each other rather than competing. Some resisted initially, but eventually most came around. The results spoke for themselves. Combined human forces proved more effective than any single culture operating alone. Maya led by example. She trained with Earth Marines, studied Incan gravitational combat, learned Aboriginal Australian spatial awareness techniques. Her willingness to adapt encouraged other Chiricahua warriors to do the same. She became a symbol of the new unified humanity, someone who honored tradition while embracing change, someone who proved that strength came from cooperation rather than isolation. One night, Jake and Maya stood together on an observation platform watching a joint exercise in progress. Earth destroyers flew in formation with Chiricahua cruisers. Maori biological ships coordinated with Mongolian raiders. Incan gravitational disruptors supported Aboriginal Australian navigation jumps. It was chaotic and beautiful and imperfect and amazing. This was humanity coming together, not erasing differences but celebrating them while finding unity and shared purpose. Maya spoke softly about her hopes for the future. She wanted to see the day when humans from any culture could travel freely between worlds, when children grew up knowing they were part of something vast and diverse and wonderful, when the artificial divisions created by 3,000 years of separation finally disappeared, not through forced homogenization but through willing cooperation and mutual respect. Jake shared his own vision. He wanted humanity to move forward together into the unknown regions of space, to explore and discover and face challenges as a unified species, to show the galaxy what humans could accomplish when they worked together instead of fighting each other. to prove that diversity was strength rather than weakness. They talked about personal futures too. Maya's assignment to the diplomatic mission was temporary. Eventually she would need to return to regular military duty. Jake's position as liaison might change as more permanent structures were established. They faced uncertainty about where their lives would lead, but they agreed to face that uncertainty together. Whatever came next, they would figure it out side by side. Jake asked if Maya ever regretted that first fight, if she wished things had gone differently. Maya was quiet for a long moment before answering. She said that fight was the most important moment of her life, not because of the combat itself, but because of what came after. When Jake removed her helmet, everything changed. Not just for them personally, but for billions of humans across the galaxy. That single moment of recognition sparked a reunion 3,000 years in the making. Jake admitted he thought he was going to die in that crater. When Maya's attacks broke through his defenses and cracked his ribs, he believed it was over. Earth would lose. Humanity would be divided. Everything they could build together would be lost. But then something shifted. Some stubborn human refusal to give up despite impossible odds. That same quality had carried humanity through countless challenges throughout history. It was the defining characteristic of their species. 6 months after that first meeting in the crater, Jake received orders that would change everything again. Earth Command was establishing a new position. Ambassador of Human Unity. Someone who would represent not just Earth but all the scattered human cultures. Someone who understood military matters but could also navigate complex diplomatic situations. Someone who had already proven capable of building bridges between civilizations that had spent millennia apart. They wanted Jake for the position. Maya received similar orders from the Chiricahua Dominion. She was being promoted to fleet commander and assigned to lead the Joint Defense Initiative, a new military force composed of warriors from every human culture. Her task was to take the training exercises and cooperation efforts and transform them into a permanent, unified command structure. It was a massive responsibility and a clear sign of the trust her people placed in her. They sat together in their shared quarters on the station and discussed these new roles. The work would be even more demanding than their current assignments. More travel, more time apart, more pressure and politics and challenges. But it was also an opportunity to shape humanity's future in fundamental ways, to ensure that the reunion of scattered human cultures resulted in lasting cooperation rather than conflict. They both knew they had to accept. The official ceremonies were held on Earth itself. Representatives from all contacted human cultures gathered in a massive amphitheater built specifically for the occasion. Jake stood on the stage in formal uniform and felt the weight of millions of eyes watching through holographic projections. Maya stood beside him in her own formal armor. The Chiricahua design was stunning. Traditional patterns merged with modern materials. A living piece of art that honored the past while embracing the future. Earth's Secretary General spoke first and outlined the new positions and their importance. Then representatives from each human culture added their endorsements and support. Aboriginal Australian elders blessed the appointments using ancient ceremonies. Incan priests performed rituals connecting Jake and Maya to the cosmic forces that bound all humanity. Maori warriors sang traditional songs welcoming them into leadership roles. Each culture contributed something unique to the ceremony. The diversity was beautiful and powerful. When the formal proceedings ended, a reception brought together diplomats and warriors and scientists from across human space. Jake found himself surrounded by people asking questions and offering congratulations. He tried to be present for each conversation, but his attention kept drifting to Maya. She was across the room speaking with Mongolian cavalry commanders. Even in a crowd, she stood out. Her presence commanded respect without demanding it. Eventually, they managed to escape the crowds and found a quiet balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Earth's moon hung low on the horizon. Somewhere up there, beyond human sight, were the scattered colonies and ships and stations that made up humanity's domain. Jake thought about how much had changed in 6 months. How much more would change in the years ahead. Maya leaned against the railing and breathed deep of Earth's air. She told Jake that standing here felt like coming home despite never having been here before. Some genetic memory, perhaps, some echo of ancestors who walked this world thousands of years ago, before the Preservation Initiative took them to the stars. Earth was in her blood even though she was born light years away. Jake understood that feeling. When he met warriors from other cultures, he saw family, not because they looked similar or shared immediate history, but because something fundamental connected them. The same curiosity that pushed humans to explore, the same stubbornness that refused to accept defeat, the same capacity for hope even in darkness. Those qualities defined humanity regardless of which world they called home. They talked about the future in practical terms. Jake's new position required a permanent residence on Earth for diplomatic access. Maya's role meant spending most of her time with the joint defense fleets in space. They would see each other less than they did now. That reality was difficult to accept, but they had known from the beginning that their lives were complicated. That building something meaningful required patience and compromise and determination. Maya said she was not interested in an easy relationship. She wanted something real and lasting, something worth fighting for the same way they fought for unity between human cultures. The challenges made it more valuable, not less. Jake agreed completely. He told her he loved her, not despite the complications but including them. All of it. Everything that made her who she was. Maya kissed him then with the moon and ocean as witnesses. She said she loved him too, more than she thought possible. More than made tactical sense. More than fit comfortably into the ordered military life she had built. He made her want things she had never considered before. A home, a family, a life beyond duty and service. Not instead of those things, but in addition to them, they stood together and watched the waves roll in below. Katie had told Jake that their parents would be proud of him. He hoped she was right. He hoped they could see somehow what he was trying to build. Not just political unity or military cooperation, but genuine connection between humans who had been separated by circumstances beyond their control. A reunion of family that had spent 3 millennia apart. The next morning began Jake's official duties as Ambassador of Human Unity. His first task was mediating a dispute between Earth colonies and Chiricahua, settlements over mining rights in a contested system. His second task involved coordinating response to a potential first contact situation with a non-human intelligence. His third task was reviewing cultural exchange programs and approving new educational initiatives. The work was endless and demanding, but it mattered. Every decision he made affected billions of lives across dozens of worlds. Maya took command of the Joint Defense Initiative with characteristic efficiency. She assembled a command staff drawing from every human culture. Her second in command was an Earth veteran named Patrick Hughes. Her chief tactical officer came from the Mongolian Expeditionary Forces. Her logistics coordinator was Incan. Her intelligence director was Aboriginal Australian. The diversity of her staff reflected the unity she was trying to build. The Joint Defense Forces began patrolling the edges of human space. They encountered 3 different non-human species in the first month. One encounter was peaceful and resulted in preliminary trade agreements. Another was neutral. The third was hostile and required military action. The unified human forces responded effectively. They proved that cooperation was not just politically convenient, but tactically superior. Reports reached Jake about Maya's leadership. Warriors from all cultures respected her. She pushed them hard but never asked anything she was not willing to do herself. She fought alongside her troops during the hostile encounter and earned commendations for bravery. Her ability to blend different fighting styles into coordinated strategies was remarkable. The Joint Defense Initiative was becoming something real and functional rather than just a political symbol. They communicated daily through video links, but seeing each other on screens was not the same as being together. They both felt the strain of separation, but they also understood that what they were building was bigger than personal comfort. Humanity needed them to succeed in their roles. The reunion of human cultures could still fail if mishandled. Wars could erupt between scattered populations. Resources could become sources of conflict rather than cooperation. Strong leadership was essential. 3 months into their new positions, they managed to arrange leave that coincided. They met on a small colony world that belonged to no single culture, but served as neutral ground for all humanity. For 1 week, they were not ambassador and fleet commander. They were just Jake and Maya, 2 people who loved each other trying to find moments of normalcy in extraordinary circumstances. They hiked through alien forests and swam in crystal-clear lakes. They talked about simple things like favorite foods and childhood memories. They avoided discussion of politics and military matters entirely. It was a deliberate escape from responsibility, a reminder that they were human before they were leaders. That personal connection mattered as much as professional duty. On their last night together before returning to their respective assignments, they lay under unfamiliar stars. Maya pointed out constellations from Chiricahua astronomy and told the traditional stories associated with each pattern. Jake shared Earth myths about similar star formations. The stories were different, but the impulse was the same. Humans looked up at the stars and created meaning. They told stories to explain the universe and their place in it. Maya asked Jake if he ever regretted accepting the ambassador position. If he ever wished he could return to simpler times when he was just a lieutenant commander following orders. Jake answered honestly. Sometimes yes. The weight of responsibility was crushing some days. The knowledge that his decisions affected billions of lives kept him awake at night. But he would not trade this path for anything. He was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Jake asked Maya the same question. She smiled, and her answer was similar. Command was lonely. The burden was heavy. Some days she questioned every decision and wondered if someone else would do better.